I Barely Got Here is a collection of stories and conversations based on 24 years in law enforcement. You have the right to be disturbed by some of the content or disagree with the viewpoints. Anything you hear can and will be dosed with sarcasm and dark humor. You have the right to know that discussions will often be graphic with language and themes that are intended for a mature audience. Do you understand your rights? Then buckle up, Buttercup. We're going 10-8. Hello and welcome back to I Barely Got Here. I'm your host, Kevin Booncher, and I'm happy to say I've got my good friend Greg in here with me again. He's spending some time in this wonderful Phoenix weather we got. Greg, you want to say hey?
Hey, Kevin.
Going to take advantage of his being here and some really unique opportunities that he's had with his working career. So without further ado, tonight's episode is Double Dipper. The opportunity that I'm talking about is, and we've touched on this in some prior episodes, is Greg worked a full 20-year career with the police department, and then he went on to work another 10 or 11?
11.
11-year career with a fire department. So you have a guy that's working at such different extremes of the public safety experience, being law enforcement and then the fire side, and there's hardly anyone that ever does anything like that. So I really want to take advantage and kind of dip into that and ask some questions. And again, because a lot of this stuff is things that I don't know either. I haven't experienced because obviously I wasn't a hose dragger. And then some comparisons and things like that. So I want to take advantage of his wisdom on all this stuff. We'll get some information on the differences. So I guess first I'll start off with, what made you want to go from being a cop to fire?
Well, it's kind of a long story, Kevin, but we got time. So, as you know, I get bored pretty easily at my jobs, and I like a new challenge. So every couple of years, I always needed to try something else. And in the police department, the jobs that I really were looking at were few and far between at that point, because I'd done most of everything that I had set out to do. I did have aspirations of maybe moving further up the chain, promoting from sergeant. But at the time we were there, or at that time, they had done away with the lieutenant position.
Yeah.
And then the next position was commander. Then you kind of become at will. You're not out on the street at all. You're sitting behind a desk, and that just wasn't for me. And about that same time, so I was kind of getting burned out on the whole police thing. I had 18 years on, and I really wasn't sure where I was going to go to next. I was working in SIB with you as a narcotics sergeant. And about that time, I met a guy in my neighborhood who worked for one of the local fire departments. And he started chirping in my ear. He's like, "You need to come work for us. You need to do this. You need to do that. You'd have so much fun. You need to get out of police work," and on and on and on and on. And so, I don't know, he chirped in my ear probably for a good year before I kind of started thinking like, you know what, that's a possibility. Because I knew if I retired at 20, I'd still have to go do something else. I'd still have to go get another job. And I just wasn't sure if I could do 20 and then 5 years in the drop.
Yeah.
I just really wasn't sure if I could be a cop for that long. And it wasn't that I didn't like the job. It was just that there just wasn't a job within the job that really was appealing to me, if that makes sense at all.
That you hadn't done already.
Right.
And again, knowing Greg, I mean, he's one of my best friends. I've known him forever. That's exactly how Greg was. Greg wasn't the kind of guy that you could say, okay, hey, we're going to throw you into this assignment and you're going to do a 10-year run. It just never would have happened. He was always looking for something different, new challenges, new experiences, et cetera. So, I mean, it makes sense to me. Now, and I remember back when you were starting to, dip your toe in this whole thing. And of course, I liked you where you were because you were with me.
Right. Yeah, we were having fun.
We were having a lot of fun. We were in SIB together, both sergeants, and had great crews, had some good folks working with us.
The people were awesome.
And we had a really good time. But, at the same time, I understood Greg's drive and his desires. And the one thing that I will throw out, too, is you got to remember, it's not like the fire department job is not physical. I mean, obviously, it's very physically driven, and you have to be in good shape. And, as I've mentioned before, Greg, luckily, he's in the position where the guy's in, phenomenal physical shape, especially, I mean, we're talking now 15 years ago.
Right.
So he was very, very capable of making that transition from essentially what you'd label as an old cop, being a 20-year vet, to a booter or a new fire guy. So that wasn't a concern. Whereas if you took your average person who was in their early 40s, they're probably not going to be able to make that transition strictly from the physical perspective. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, and obviously that was a big concern of mine because, I mean, I was 40 when I decided to make the change,
Right.
or 41 actually. And you're right. I mean, I don't think I'm as a good physical shape as what Kevin is laying out, but I do keep myself physically fit. It's just part of my everyday life, I guess. But again, I was done with the police work and
Right.
with my friend chirping in my ear all the time about you need to come work, you need to come work. And then I started looking into it and it was feasible. And there's EMT, I had to go get out and get my EMT.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you, what'd you have to do?
Well, it was kind of a long drawn out process because I thought, well, I'll just call the community college and I'll do a weekend and get my EMT. I'll go there for 16 hours, get my EMT license, and everything will be good. But
Yeah.
no, it was like a 16-week class, and you had to go a couple nights a week, and then there was all this little testing on the side. I didn't realize that being an EMT was as involved as it was. So yeah, there was the EMT thing I had to go through. In the hiring process for the fire department, they had what they called an intern academy. And so one night a week, and then every Saturday, I think it was for 6 weeks, I had to go out and be like in a mock fire academy. And they put you through these drills. You had to take tests. You had to study. So there was a lot of time involved in. So not only was I going through that intern academy, I was still going to the community college to get my EMT. And then come to find out the recruiting process, they were looking to hire before I actually hit my official 20-year retirement date with the police department. So I was still trying to figure out how I was going to work my time because I needed to retire from the police department in order to make up the difference in pay because starting firefighters don't make very much money.
Right.
So it would have been a tremendous pay cut. So I still needed to retire at the same time I was still with the fire department. So it's kind of confusing, but at the time, the police department I worked at, they let you run out your unused sick and vacation time. So I was on the books at my old police department for 7 months, getting to my 20 years while I was working as a firefighter in Chandler.
Got it.
So yeah, for the first 7 months, life was really good because I was making good money. But then
Double dip.
yeah. So I mean, at first the transition was hard because I was working 40 hours a week at the PD, plus going to this intern academy and then going to school at the same time. And my job offer totally depended on the fact that I passed my EMT. And it's not something that's super easy to pass either. Like there's work involved in it.
Right.
And so the stars aligned, everything worked out. I was able to get into the fire academy and still, run my time out with the police department, and the police department was very accommodating for it. Yeah, so I was able to retire from the police department and I started my career at the fire department.
So would I be right in saying that you were probably one of the more mature recruits for the fire department?
Well, let me put it this way. I was 42, the youngest one was 18, and I was older than his dad. So that would say,
That's awesome.
Yeah. So I was actually father figure.
My gosh.
Yeah.
That is so funny.
Well, and it's funny too, because when like the first day of this intern academy, there's maybe 40 or 45 people in this room and you all have to stand up and introduce each other. And so like, if we were sitting at the same table, I would interview you and then I would stand up and I'd introduce you. Well, there's ex-football players, ex-NHL hockey players, ex-baseball players, track athletes, 18-year-olds, 21-year-olds, these guys that are just buffed. And I'm thinking, there's no way in hell. I don't stand a chance in hell in this group of people. But sometimes brain wins over brawn.
So I was going to say, sometimes being the old bull wins out over the young bulls, right?
Yeah, it's just like that old story where the dad and the baby bull are sitting on top of the hill, and he's like, "Hey, let's run down." The young one's like, "Hey, let's run down and hump all those cows in the field." And the old man goes, "Why don't we just walk down there and just take our pick or get the best one," or whatever, however that story goes.
The young one says one, and the old one says all.
Oh, okay. So it's the other way around.
See, you got to help these hose draggers
senile.
out. You got to help these hose draggers.
So
sometimes.
we need to rephrase this hose dragger. hero.
Anyway, Hose Dragger, my podcast. So cool. You get in, you do the academy. How would you compare the academy, the fire academy, to the police academy?
The police academy was a lot more military-like. You had to shine your shoes. You had to shine your gun belt. Everything on your uniform had to be straight. Your name tag had to be polished. Pleats on your uniform had to be straight. I mean, it was pretty crazy. And, you know, you did like the inspection every morning, and the sergeant would walk through and ding you on this and whatnot.
Right.
Where Fire Academy was a lot more relaxed. I mean, we're wearing just, like Dickie pants and T-shirts, and our boots are always trashed just because we're out doing all this physical stuff every day. There were some similarities, but it was a lot more chill.
But would you say the Fire Academy was a lot more physical?
But it was a lot more physical, for sure. I would say for me, mentally wise, it was so much easier because I had already been through one academy, and then I had already done my career at PD. The whole idea of academy is to like break people down and then build them back up.
Stress you a little bit.
Right. And so for me, it was kind of like, this isn't stress. Like some of the stuff that we had done before was stressful.
Sure.
And you get involved in this stuff and you're kind of like, this is nothing.
But what about the other folks that hadn't been through? Like, did you notice some of those guys were pretty stressed out about it all?
They would get stressed. And that was nice from my point of view because I could step up and be like, hey, this isn't that big a deal. Right. Like, don't worry about it. Don't get stressed out over it.
Take it from the old bull.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so you run through the academy, you get through that okay. Do you lose many people going through like we did in, PD? Like, we lost almost half our class by the time it was done. But
typically no, but our class, I think we lost 2, and it was mostly because they were untruthful.
Oh, okay. But I'm sure, but it's just like PD, you lose people to academic issues, you lose people to disciplinary, you lose people to physical injury type of stuff. So, I mean, it happens.
Yeah, it happens, but it was pretty rare in fire to be losing people out of the academy.
Okay. So you get through the academy. What do you think was the biggest thing that jumped out at you once you actually started working that you were like, wow, I had no idea about this, or, this is totally different than what I expected?
Well, the culture was a lot more relaxed, because it seemed like at PD, you get to work and stuff just starts happening, like bam, 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 bam. You hop in your patrol car, you're out answering calls. You have officers coming into your office being like, hey, we need to do this, we need to do this. I have this all planned out. Where with fire, it's just more of a relaxed type atmosphere. And you live with your crew for 24 to 48 hours at a time.
Right.
So there's 4 to 8 people at each station, and you're living with those people. So it's more of like a team, I would say, as opposed to, because being a beat cop is kind of individual.
I was just going to say individual,
But in the fire, it's definitely a team. Like because you just can't run down a Circle K and get a big gulp by yourself.
Right.
The engine and the 4 of you have to go.
Right.
You're like everywhere you want to go, everybody goes with you. It's just not like you can't do anything on your own for the most part.
Right.
So there was that, and there was a lot more medical related calls than I knew there was going to be some, but there was a lot more than I ever expected.
So, I mean, obviously, again, we know that as time has transitioned, the fire department proper is not fighting fires every day. They're rolling on just tons of medical calls. So even with, kind of the forewarning that I'm sure you got, it was still more than you anticipated.
Yeah. And because, in the academy, you ran the gamut. You worked on a lot of hose poles and taking fire hydrants and, fighting fires and how you go about it and looking out for different signs of bad things that are going to happen. But on the same token, there was a ton of medical training too. And so we probably should have expected it, or I should have expected it, but it was more than I thought.
So was it disappointing? Was it kind of okay, it is what it is? Or, what were your thoughts?
Well, as you know, we do the job that we do because we like adrenaline. We like those adrenaline rushes. And the adrenaline rushes in fire are fighting fire. And maybe going to like a really horrendous accident scene or a really horrendous scene of something where you get to use you're really, you're going bam, 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 working really hard to save somebody's life or whatnot. So there wasn't as many of those adrenaline spikes as I had hoped for.
So give me an example of what's one of those medical calls that you rolled on that you're just kind of like, oh, geez.
Oh, well, there was a bunch of them, but I mean, we'd get on medical calls where people would be like, yeah, I cut my finger and I need Band-Aids, or I got a headache. I need some aspirin. I mean, basically there were quite a few medical calls that, if people just would have opened up their medicine cabinet, they could have taken care of it themselves. Or people, people have this false sense that if they go to the hospital via ambulance, that they're going to be seen a lot quicker than if you were just to walk in, which is a total farce.
Yeah.
Because everybody's triaged. If you're triaged if you're walk-in, or you're triaged if you're brought in by ambulance.
So it kind of leads me to my next thing. Knowing other fire guys, retired and current and everything, would you say that the medical side is a bit of a pet peeve? I mean, isn't that kind of an issue for most fire guys?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, because I don't know. It just seems like we now as a society rely on 911 way too much for non-emergency related issues, quite honestly.
So, and I guess, the reply to that is, I think 20 years ago, a lot of these dispatchers would essentially say, take care of yourself. We ain't coming. Have a nice day. Whereas now it's generally expected that you have to respond to a 911 call. That's right?
Well, yeah, I mean, liability, because I'm sure somewhere down the road, somebody sued a municipality because they didn't respond to a 911 call.
Right.
So yeah, if they call 911, you got to go, emergency or not. And, this was kind of what would always go through my head is we would be, because again, 911 call comes out, the four of you get on the engine or the four of you get on the ladder, and off goes this $500,000 fire truck going down the road to help some lady or some guy because they have a headache or they stubbed their toe. But in the meantime, our mom could be having a heart attack 2 houses down, but you're having to help this person because of the stubbed toe. Then they're having to call another engine from further away to go help the person with the heart attack.
Yeah, you're tied up.
Because you're tied up helping this person with the stubbed toe. And that was always my pet peeve, is running these bullshit medical calls when there could be a more important life-threatening emergency that came out.
Sure. Which is, one of the few similarities there is with fire and PD is when you're a cop, especially when you're newer, I mean, you want to go to the important calls. You want to go to the big calls. You don't want to go to the dog barking calls. You don't want to go to the calls, like you're saying, where people are calling in with essentially things that take care of it yourself. This is a total waste of time. However, the resources involved are exponentially greater when you start talking about the fire side, because you're talking about huge pieces of equipment, guys that roll in a gang of 4. It just, it's just such a bigger expenditure of resource. So it's really frustrating.
Well, and when I first started fire, it's changed a lot since, but you ran code 3, you ran licensed sirens to every 911 call you got. So now you're not only are you putting the firefighter and everybody in the truck at risk, but you're potentially putting just somebody driving down the street at risk, because people are clueless on what to do when they see an emergency vehicle running licensed sirens. They don't know what to do. Most people try to outrun them. But you still get the people that are pulling to the left, pulling to the right, pulling in front of you.
Stop right in the middle.
Yeah, I mean, so every time you run lights and sirens, you're putting everybody at risk.
Yeah.
And so you run lights and sirens to a stubbed toe. I mean, come on, like, what's the thought process behind that?
Well, it's funny because, I think back now again, because I think to the PD side, we didn't run code 3 to hardly anything, even hot calls, because you knew all it did was jam everything up.
You actually get there faster.
That's right. You would get there quicker if you just, you were speeding, you were flying, you were breaking traffic law, but as soon as you start hitting lights and sirens, people they lock up. They don't know what to do. It's like a danger, Will Robinson. I don't know what I'm supposed to do kind of thing.
Right. Well, and like I said, nowadays the philosophy is they're running, they call it code 2, where they're not running lights and sirens.
Got it.
So they're running code 2 to the majority of medical calls anymore. And they're actually finding out that the response times are almost the same.
That doesn't surprise me a bit.
Yeah. Even like all the fire trucks have emitters on them. So they can trigger a red light So if you're approaching an intersection, and if you're running lights and sirens, the emitter goes off, and that's why all of a sudden like lights will change real quick.
Right.
It's because there's an emitter on the truck that actually changes it.
Right. Which is a great idea.
Right.
I mean, they've been doing that for a long time, but it's a great idea.
But it still jacks traffic up.
Sure.
Because nobody wants to stop for a red light around here.
Right.
I mean, they're in a hurry.
Hey, don't get it. I'm not the problem with the fire department, guys, so don't stop me. I got places to be, things to do.
I got Jack in the Box.
I don't know about that. No Jack in the Box. Hey, and before I get into the next question, I do want to take a break for the sponsor of this episode. This episode is brought to you by John Farron, a realtor with Home Smart Lifestyles in Queen Creek, Arizona. A retired police sergeant, John continues to help the community as he assists families with the sale or purchase of their homes in the Phoenix metro area. Whether you're a first-time home buyer, a seasoned investor, or somewhere in between, John has the experience, knowledge, and ability to safely guide you through the process. For a free, no-obligation consult, you can reach John at 480-458-7399, on the internet at www.eastvalleyproperties.net, or see him on YouTube at East Valley Properties with John Farron. All right, and we're back with Greg. I do have a lot of questions, and another question that I have for you is, give me an example. So say that what's the difference since you have both sides? You roll up to a bad wreck, and what's the difference of rolling up as a cop versus rolling up as a fire guy?
Well, as you know, there's tons of crap that goes through your head when you first roll up on an accident scene. And you obviously you got to figure out what traffic lanes to block off, what kind of resources you need, how you need to block off the intersection to protect people. Can you move the car? Can you not move the car? Is anybody hurt? Do I need fire there? Just all this stuff is going through your mind.
Is one guy drunk?
One guy drunk, and you're always looking over your back because you just don't know if someone's blowing through your cones. You don't know if someone's going around your car because they have to go that way, even though it's blocked with all these cars that are just bashed up. So you have all this stuff going through your head. First and foremost is like, I got to protect myself. Like, I got to look out for me. When we used to roll up there with the fire, we would park the truck. We didn't care where we parked the truck. It didn't matter. If we had to block 8 lanes of traffic, we blocked 8 lanes of traffic. It didn't matter to us if the traffic flowed or not.
Oh, yeah, and I think you guys did it on purpose half the time.
Well, and we'd always position the truck to where it would protect us from any potential people that would blast through the intersection or blast through cones.
Makes sense.
But then once you're there, your main focus was the patient. And so that's all. We didn't have to worry about what's going on behind us because we knew the police department was taking care of us. We did usually have one person on our crew just kind of step back and just watch what was going on just to make sure. But for the most part, we didn't have to worry about our safety. We knew our safety was being taken care of. Yeah. So our primary focus was patient and the patient only.
Interesting. I think that, I think about it and I totally get it. I agree with you. I think, as the cop, you arrive, you got 12 things you got to do at the same time. Fire rolls up, they basically focus on the patient, blah, blah, blah. But I think the other difference is you get there to that mangled up body. And as the cop, you're looking at that body going, ooh, hope fire gets here quick because I really don't want to mess with that. And normally you would. And then the fire guys, obviously, you guys do got to mess with that body. You got to treat them. You got to touch them. You got to render treatment and the whole thing. So I think that is a difference with the cops is we see it, but we don't always have to mess with it. Whereas fire guys, you got to go hands on with it.
Yeah. I mean, you're totally true, but that's what we did. That's what our job was. So it wasn't that big a deal. I mean,
no, but I think it's a difference.
You would see some gruesome stuff, but you'd just be like, hey, we're here to do the best we can, potentially save this person.
Right.
So it wasn't that big of a deal. I will tell you one thing that was really enjoyable when I became in fire was we were only there as long as we had to treat the patient, and then we just left. And when we left, the cops were always still there.
That's true.
And sometimes we'd drive back through that intersection 30 minutes to an hour later, and the cops would still be there.
Well, especially if it was like a fatality or something. I mean, you're talking hours of investigation, road closures. Again, if you're processing a DUI or something like that, all that stuff still goes into account.
Right.
Well, I used to laugh because I remember giving you guys crap all the time because there's always one dude with a clipboard and he had like a 1-page report to write. Like no matter what happened, you guys could roll up on the apocalypse, do your thing. And then one dude had a clipboard. He wrote like a paragraph, and that was it. You guys are done.
That was it.
I know. Damn it. Don't start me. Don't start
Took
me.
like 5 minutes.
Damn it. So, okay. And let me throw out something kind of related to that. So, what kind of difference did you notice with regard to how the general public treats you, looks at you, sees you, and then how did you feel making that transition from wearing, I mean, you weren't wearing uniform at the time we left, but, you were a cop, so what's the difference between cop and fire that way?
Well, it's funny because a lot of people ask me that question when they find out that I did both jobs. And I always just tell them, I said, well, people would wave at you with all their fingers as a firefighter. It's funny because you kind of have a different perspective on life in general, I guess, because we were talking about this earlier about the four conditions, like the four color conditions that people live in. You have like white where people are just carefree, like they just don't have a care in the world. Yep. Then you have like yellow where there's a little heightened alertness, and then orange, which is a little bit more, and then you have red where people are almost just kind of like paranoid and I wouldn't say paranoid, but you're always really having to pay attention to what's going on around you. And obviously when we were in uniform as a cop, it was always red. You had to be in red all the time. And it was a big mental strain because you're always on your A game. Where with fire, majority time, it's white. You don't have to worry about someone sneaking up behind you, trying to shoot you or trying to hurt you, or people were happy to see you. People were like, oh my gosh, thank God you're here.
Yeah.
Or they're always waving at you.
Right. With all their fingers.
Yeah. You go to the grocery store, they try to buy you grocery because we'd have to eat as a crew, because again, we're there for 24 hours. So people are always trying to buy you groceries. They're always sitting there talking to you. Like they're super happy to see you. Like, oh, and they're always thanking you. Thank you so much for your service. Thank you so much. Where as a cop, that was few and far between.
Well, yeah, and I totally get it. I mean, we could go into details and expand on that whole question a lot more. But I mean, that's the crux of it. Is they're almost like opposed, completely opposed. Every aspect is opposing. Like, public loves you as a fire guy. They hate you as the cops, and it's not. I throw out the term hate because that's just the shortest and easiest thing to use. But nobody wants to get pulled over. Nobody wants to see the cops. What happens when you see a cop car on the freeway? Everybody slows down. Everybody gets paranoid. And to be quite honest, they're probably in their car going, freaking cop. Yeah. God dang it. I wish you'd get off the freeway, right? Well, it's not even so much an intentional thing, but it's just the way it is. A cop's job is as negative based as a fire guy's job is as positive based, if that makes sense.
Well, yeah. And you think that when they call fire, it's because they need help. They need help because they don't feel good. Yeah. Where you call a cop, they may have just gotten broken into, or, their wife may have just called them because they just got their, the crap beaten out of them. Like, it's a very, very bad day. Like, when the cops show up, people are not happy.
Right.
When fire shows up, they're happy because now they think their life is going to be saved. Everything's going to be so much better.
And they're all a bunch of good-looking dudes.
All they do
in shape.
They sit and do curls all day long.
Which I have to preface, hey, there are females firefighters as well. So when I say guys or whatever, I'm including both of those. But yeah, so it's a big difference. And again, we could go on, but I think it's a very interesting dynamic. And again, Greg having experienced both sides of that. It's easy for me to speak to it, but he's actually experienced it. So, it comes up in time to time in conversation. I just think it's really interesting.
Well, and one thing I want to throw out, Kevin, is in the public safety retirement in Arizona, I think you get maxed out at like 32 years of service.
Yeah.
Where you don't see a lot of police officers going 32 years.
No.
They're retiring a lot sooner than that. And if they are going 32 years, they might be in like some cush job where they're sitting behind a desk or
administrator.
Where you see a lot of fire guys doing the full 32 years.
Yeah.
Because I think there's just a lot less stress involved. I don't know about the physical attributes. I think there's a lot more stress on your body, but not on your head. Not mentally.
No, I think
mentally it's a lot easier, but I think physically it's a lot more.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. The other thing that I think about as we're talking too is, you look at how many cops go through the academy, get into the job, and then literally quit on like the second day or their first year or their second year or whatever. It's actually a pretty big percentage versus how many fire dudes and dudettes get out of the academy, start their career, and then leave it. It's got to be such a smaller percentage.
It is. I mean, obviously, I only did half the time in fire that I did in PD, but the turnover in PD was much, much greater than it was at fire.
I would think. Again, it just shows the difference. And again, I think it's that mental aspect that it's exhausting. It's exhausting to have to, always watch your back. And then as you progress and you're a sergeant, that was the most stressful for me, was trying to make sure I kept my people safe versus yourself.
Well, and there's a huge perception difference between cops and fire in the public side too. I mean, look at who's making headlines all the time in the news. It's cops.
Always.
Firefighters do everything right. Cops do everything wrong.
Yeah.
So your administration is going to be different too, because you're not that they're doing the right thing.
They make mistakes.
Yeah,
like everybody else does.
But they're not as criticized.
Yeah, they're not scrutinized near to that extent.
And so you're walking a fine line when you're a cop. You're like, I'm being videotaped. People are watching me. Anything I do, I'm being watched.
Yeah.
Where with fire, they're like, oh, look at you. They're so cute. They're like, oh, we love them so much. You know what I mean? Like, so that's a huge difference too. Is your administration is on you a lot more as a cop as opposed to a firefighter.
That's a good point.
And that was kind of another driving force that kind of made me leave the police department, was the administration. At the time, they were very, very uptight.
Yeah.
Well, and they were Monday morning quarterback in everything you did. Any decision you did, you got called out on.
Yeah, and you were done with it. You just wanted to relax a little bit.
Yeah, and it's just like...
Yeah, I totally get it.
If you can't trust me doing my job, then why would I be here?
I totally get it. Yeah, thank God we ain't doing that job now.
Yeah.
Really.
And most of the people that were Monday morning quarterbacks didn't even have nearly the experience we did.
No.
But I'm not going to get on that.
No, yeah, let's
we'll get off that one right now.
Stay on the PD fire thing. So, another question I have is, did you find that there were many occasions or times or calls or whatever where your PD experience was useful for fire?
Oh, absolutely.
Like what kind of stuff?
Well, I will tell you that as much as I wanted to hang out in this white zone, it was hard for me.
Oh, I'm sure.
So I would say I spent most of my career maybe in the yellow to the orange. But yeah, there would be times where we would run a call, like we'll just say a domestic violence type situation. So husband hits his wife and, she calls 911. Well, we would always wait until the police department showed up and made sure that the scene was code 4 or all secure before we would roll in. But we'd always carry a police radio on our engine. And so sometimes you get on these crazy calls where the cops are talking back and forth to each other, but it's all codes. And fire guys are looking at each other like, what's going on? And they'd hand the radio to me and they'd say, can you decipher what's being said here? And so obviously it was easy for me because I'd lived it for 20 years.
Right.
And then there's other times where you run on calls where our patient may not be the most cooperative and agitated and just kind of, for whatever, maybe on drugs or just not it's not like the best case scenario. I mean, 99% of our medical calls, the police didn't come with us. So you're out there by yourself, but you had 4 people and and some of the guys were big, so you didn't have to worry too much about it.
Yeah.
But still, you could kind of step back and watch these people. And sometimes, when they get agitated and right before they start swinging fists or whatnot, they'll start maybe like clenching their jaw or, making fists with their hands. And, so I'd kind of see those little bits of signs of what's going on. And I'd tap the person talking to the patient, be like, hey, be careful because they're getting agitated. It looks like you might get hit here pretty quick. So, be careful.
Yeah.
And there were a couple of times where I tapped the fire guy on the shoulder and be like, hey, this guy's about ready to swing at you. Be careful. He'd be like, yeah, whatever. I'm big. I got big muscles. And then, he'd get punched.
Right. And you'd go,
told you so.
Told ya.
Yeah.
Look at the old bull again.
Yeah.
Interesting. Does fire not use many radio codes?
I only remember 2 radio codes. One was 962 for an accident with injuries and then dead body, but they called it like a 901H, which...
That's what we called it, I think. Right?
But I thought that was homicide.
Oh, I don't know. 901 Henry. I don't know.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, you're right. Yeah.
I thought it was the same.
Yeah. So
either way.
And I don't even know why they use 962, because the only accidents we go on are ones with injuries.
Right.
So it's kind of like, but those are the only radio calls.
Interesting. I never even thought about that. Interesting. I could see that, because a lot of those fire guys, again, when you're always on the verge of being assaulted, you learn to look for all those little ticks, and the like you're saying, the clenching of the teeth, the neck muscles or the veins coming out, or the clenching fists, or I always remember the one where you always knew a dude was getting ready to run because they'd start looking around.
Yep.
Like, instead of looking you in the face, as soon as you saw them start looking around for exits, you're like, oh, hell, here we go, man.
I gotta grab onto this guy.
I better stretch out quick because the run's coming, But so yeah, I could see that, because those guys they're not really trained, and they probably don't have to worry about it hardly ever.
No, hardly. So. I mean, I would say I was with a crew for a while there that we were working in a lower income part of the town. We got in quite a few little scuffles. Yeah. We had a captain that was pretty good he should have been a cop. The captain I worked with should have been a cop. Everybody that knows me, that knows where I work, will know who I'm talking about now. But he was pretty good at riling people up. And so fortunately the other guy I worked with was a collegiate wrestler. And the fights never lasted very long between the two of us. Yeah,
I wouldn't think so.
Yeah.
What would make someone want to fight with the fire department?
Most times they were drunk.
Okay, just being belligerent, not wanting to.
Yeah, and like we'd get called to a house, and it wouldn't even be the person that is the patient. It would just be like a bystander that would be
nice,
talking crap, or trying to intervene, and we'd just be like, hey, just step aside, we're talking, just something like that. And then they get agitated. And
right. Nasty.
Yeah.
I want to touch on something from the conversation that we were having earlier. We talked about how there's been this transition from firefighters fighting fires to being basically medical, emergency responders so much anymore. And, a lot of that's based on technology and everything else. But, the fact remains is that's what fire guys do now. They respond to medical stuff far greater than they go to an actual fire. But at the same time, dealing with medical emergencies or dead people is not pleasant. And I've talked about this before, about some of the calls I've been involved with a suicide or a death or whatever. And, as a cop, it's not your favorite call to deal with. But we were talking earlier, you and I, about, how many of those dead body type of cases you get involved in, and you guys have to go. I mean, the cops, we can't deal with it. You guys have to go assess the patient, so to speak, and then say, okay, yeah, and you have to call the doctor and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, the term, it's called code. Like, we get called to a code.
There you go, code.
And it's the police can't pronounce somebody dead. I mean, even a paramedic or fire guys cannot pronounce somebody dead unless it's like obvious, like heads missing, rigor mortis. They have paramedics they have all these protocols that they have to follow, and they actually work underneath a doctor's guidelines. So the doctor has the ultimate say in what they do.
Right.
And so there's certain guidelines, or there's certain things that like the paramedic can officially announce them dead. But then there's other times where if a family member was with them and they passed away while they're sitting there with them, and they call us and it's within the body's still warm, or we have a moral obligation. Like, we have to work that person and take them to the hospital.
Right.
And granted, there are some cases where no, but for the most part, you have to work that person and take them to the hospital.
Right.
And so, yeah, we did a lot of that. And sometimes you'd work somebody at the scene, and then you'd call the doctor up, and the doctor would be like, yep, go ahead and call them, put the time of death as this. And then when I'll sign the death certificate or whatever they need to do. And then we would just, leave the body and have the ME's office come and get them.
Right. I guess, we were talking about that stuff, and I think what I want to do is just make people understand, death can be pretty disgusting and pretty nasty, aside from the whole fact that it's just sad, and quite frankly, it's creepy as hell to deal with dead bodies. It's weird. It's creepy. And we were talking about, you were talking about the bathroom deaths.
Oh, the commode codes?
Could you explain that?
Yeah, I can't, like we were talking earlier, I cannot remember the medical term for what happens, but you have an unhealthy person sitting, in the morning or whatnot, they go to do their business and they sit down on the toilet and then they clench down and it causes some sort of reaction in the body and it stops their heart. And so they, boom, fall over next to the toilet. And so it's always really pleasant when you're dealing with somebody that has just taken a dump or was in the process of taking a dump. So their pants are down around their ankles. Maybe they have a shirt on, maybe they don't.
That's not funny.
That's super funny.
That's not funny.
Moving
forward.
Yeah.
Moving forward.
Yeah. But, and they're like, the bathroom, you know how some people keep their bathrooms not very clean. Mm-hmm. And the person is stuck between the toilet and the tub. So you're having to drag these people out, no pants on, sometimes no shirt on, in a disgusting house. You have to drag them out into the middle of the living room because you have to have room in order to work these people.
Sure.
I mean, there's a lot of stuff that goes on when you try to bring somebody back from...
Right. It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
And again, the same, you're trying to move 200, 300, 400 pounds of dead weight that's flopping and slitting and quite frankly slippery with their own waste.
And sometimes nice and, you're sweat. Sometimes the heat's not, or the air conditioning's not on. So you're sweating your ass off.
Yeah.
And you're trying to drag them out by their ankles and sometimes it could get comical, really.
Yeah. And it's not, it's not pretty. I mean, a lot of times too, you're trying to do things that there is no other way but to basically use brute force and be twisting and pulling and tweaking on someone's body.
And family members are there watching you do it.
Yeah. Yeah. And, sometimes freaking out. But anyway, now I'm digressing, but I had to throw it out there. I had never heard commode code. And I thought that was a pretty interesting term.
Yeah, I want to say I learned that really early on. I want to say it was probably, I was still on probation. I want to say I was a week out of the academy when I experienced that one.
Did it surprise, and this goes back to even just being a cop, but going from cop to fire, both jobs, when you got into public safety period, did it surprise you how many dead body calls that you went on, whether it was suicide, accidents? I just remember I was really surprised how many people were dying every day.
Yeah, that and the destruction of the human body.
Yeah.
So there was a lot more of that than I ever expected.
Yeah. Stuff that you look at and you're like, this, you couldn't even imagine this for like a TV show or something.
Or how people survive it.
Yeah. Crazy, isn't it?
Yeah.
Crazy. Okay. So, that should have been the title. Commode code. That should have been the title.
It should have.
Oh, well. Too late now.
Too late now.
And I guess as we're kind of cruising in on closing everything up, what do you think? And again, it's like asking a cop, what's the most, memorable call of your 20-year career? But I'm going to kind of throw it out there to you for your 11 plus years. What do you think is a call that maybe not the most memorable or the worst or whatever, but what's something that, like, when I throw that phrase out, what comes to mind for you?
Well, I have quite a few that I remember, but for whatever reason, this code sticks out in my mind. It was towards the end of my career. We get a call of a code, and you got to remember that in the town I worked in, we had 4 people assigned to each truck, either an engine or a ladder, and at least two of the four were paramedics, and then the others were EMTs. So we get a call to a code, and we walk in, and it's in a kind of a lower economic area in the city, and the apartment was just jammed with crap, like hoarders. And there were these 2 younger people sitting at the table, and fake tears are coming out, and they're like, oh, our mom just passed away. We just talked to her like 2 minutes ago, like right before we called 911. We had talked to her just momentarily before that. And then we went in to check on her, and, she wasn't breathing. And so we go in there into her room. It's a small apartment room. There's a hospital bed. The lady sitting in the hospital bed weighs 400 pounds easy.
Oy.
And no clothes on from the waist down. And there's crap stacked all over this room. Like, only one guy could walk between the crap stacked in the room and the side of the hospital bed. And the other side of the bed was against the wall. So of course, they weren't like really using Depends or anything like that. So basically they were using towels, and they would just shove a towel between the poor lady's legs. And she had not been cleaned up probably for at least a week because there was a pile of crap. It was running down her bed, running onto the floor. There's a big old pile of this on the floor.
Oh,
and of course, it stunk really, really bad. Sure enough, I can't remember. What paramedic goes up to assess her. We put her on the AED, the monitor, and there's no heartbeat, but still warm. So there's a potential that, she could be brought back to life. So we kind of we start our CPR and doing the prelims of everything that needs to be done. But then we start thinking, like, how are we going to get her out of the bed? How are we going to get her out of the room? She won't fit on a regular ambulance gurney, so you have to call a special ambulance to show up to haul her to the hospital. So we call the ambulance right off the bat, and they're like 30 minutes away. Wow. So we realize, well, we're going to be working this lady for 30 minutes, and in the meantime, we'll get her out of the room. And the more we start looking at this, there's no way we're going to be able to do it.
You can't even get her out of the room.
Can't even get her out of the room. So we called the doctor for, to basically say, hey, she was old. I mean, she was in her 70s too. And obviously life was not good for her.
Right.
Doctor's like, nope, bring her into the hospital. If she's only been dead a short amount of time, body's still warm, bring her in the hospital. I'm like, all right. So we start working her a little bit more. We can't do proper procedures because you need to, in order to do CPR or like chest compressions properly, they have to be on a hard surface. Well, she's on this bed. So, so we're not giving her proper chest compressions. The only way we can do that is if we pull her literally outside, because there's no room for her in any of the rooms in the place because there's so much crap.
Well, that's if you can even get her through the door.
Well, we can't get her through the door. So we're thinking, well, we're going to have to drag her out to the front yard in order to do CPR. So we call the doctor back, and we explain this all to the doctor. Doctor's like, nope, bring her in. So we're like, all right. So I clearly remember, this image is clear to me to this day, is that she had a wound on one of her legs, and it was pressed up against the metal railing of the hospital bed. And the engineer reached over and picked her leg up to move it over, because we would carry like these big tarps, and we could roll people onto these big tarps, and then we'd carry them out of the tarps had handles on them.
Yeah.
And so that's how we'd carry like the bigger people out of tight spaces.
Sure.
So we were going to roll her over to put her on this tarp, fight around all the crap and stuff that's laying on the bed, like literally the crap. Yeah. So he goes and moves the leg, and the leg had kind of grown into the metal railing. And when he pulled it away, it ripped open, and all these maggots fell out of her leg. And the smell, like we were wearing, like everybody says these N95s really, really work well. Well, they don't work that well, because we were all wearing N95s, and the stench that came rolling through that room was unbelievable.
Oh my God.
So we all looked at each other like, holy cow. And one of the guys had to run out of the room because he was about ready to throw up.
Yeah.
And so we all just look at each other like, there is no way. Like this, if I looked at, this is the world according to Greg. I looked at it and said, if I was this lady, I would be yelling at me from above saying, do not bring me back to life.
Right.
Like that's what I would be saying.
Right. Well, I mean, it's almost, there's some negligence involved too. I mean, obviously she, made her own choices and she's what she is, but.
Well, so we call the doctor back at this point, and the doctor's like, okay, I'll let you
call her.
I'll let you call her.
Wow.
Yeah. But I will tell you though, we ended up calling the police department on that one. And last we heard, they were going to file like adult abuse against the people that were supposedly caretaking for her.
Right. Well,
because they were getting a check.
I was just gonna say, I'll bet they were getting some compensation from the government to help take care of her. And that's foul, man.
So I remember that one just because it was a little special.
God.
Yeah, it was just, needless to say, when we all got back to the station, we were like peeling clothes off and doing extra loads of laundry.
You're spraying each other with the big hoses to try to get your skin clean.
Absolutely,
that's nasty, man. Well, I think that exemplifies the nasty side of dealing with the medical stuff and the fire, man. That's gross.
Oh yeah. And I mean, stuff like that goes on all the time.
Sure.
It's sad. It's
Well,
really
because
sad.
somebody has to deal with it.
Yeah.
I mean, again, everybody, you know that it occurs, but the bottom line is someone has to physically deal with that and then physically move them and treat them and all this other stuff. But wow. All right.
So on that note,
Yeah, I can't, the whole leg and the maggots coming out thing is like burnt into my head right now. I don't know if I can get over it. I may have to step away for a moment as I'm thinking about that. Is there anything else? I mean, I think we kind of hit on a lot of the stuff I wanted to hit on about the differences and similarities and of the whole public safety, with police and fire. And, and again, we didn't want to make this into a big joke thing about, who hates who and who loves who. And, because like I've explained 100 times, cops and firefighters are like, siblings to each other. We're allowed to bag on each other all day long. But, if anybody starts picking on one or the other, hell's going to come down on you because we have such a good relationship here. In my opinion, West Coast stuff. I don't know about the East Coast as much, but it's interesting to talk to Greg because he's seen both of them, firsthand. And as much as I want to, I'm not going to put him on the spot and say which one did you like better or which one do you think was better, or I'm just going to stop right there. So I'm not going to put him on the spot there because I don't want to make enemies because I have friends because of you now with the fireside too. Right. So I don't want to piss them off. But anyway, so I think we've kind of hit the majority of the stuff I wanted to hit. Really, I think, again, it's an interesting topic. And I think that it really exemplifies, again, how different they are from the aspect of just the way the public perceives them.
That is for sure the biggest.
Yeah.
And like you said, I mean, there's a brotherhood within the police department. There's a brotherhood within the fire department. But there's a brotherhood between the two of them.
Yeah,
for sure. You'll talk to both sides that can't stand the other side, but that is just a super small percentage. And I mean, I've seen plenty of guys when I was working at fire jump into fights with, they'd love nothing more jump into a fight with a cop.
Oh yeah.
And vice versa.
Yep.
I mean, it's funny you see a fireman just someone kind of chest up to him or whatnot. The polyester pileup after that happens is hilarious.
That's what I'm talking about.
It's awesome. I mean, it's really good to see.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, and you have to. I mean, you have to support because again, you
absolutely.
do so many things jointly, especially, and we haven't really touched on it. We're not going to, but you talk about these gigantic cataclysmic calls like these mass shootings or huge structure fires or, a cataclysmic accident. I mean, fire and PD have to work together seamlessly in order to, take care of people. And that happens all the time here.
Absolutely.
We do really well with that. But anyway, is there anything else? I mean, anything else you can think of that, kind of hits home with kind of the general topic of what we're going over here, or anything else you want to say or put out there at all?
I'm just going to throw this out there. The only reason why I did 11 with fire was because that's what my goal was. Like my goal was to do 10 years there and then like officially retire.
Right.
So it wasn't that I didn't like the job or I didn't like who I was working with. Right. I mean, that job would be easy to do another 10, 15 years with, but it was time.
Yeah. Well, you're just in such a different place in life than the average, hose dragger that starts off in their, early mid-20s.
Right.
Yeah.
I thought 31 years in public safety was plenty. And
I think it's enough.
Yeah.
Time to enjoy.
Absolutely.
Good. Cool. Well, awesome. Well, I really appreciate you getting in for this. I think it's, again, I kind of like doing these episodes sometimes where I don't know very much about stuff because it really kind of gets my brain working and makes me ask some good questions. But
I'm glad you couldn't get Jay in here today and that you kind of reached down deep in your reserves to call me. Well, so, what am I like? 10th on the list or something?
No, it's because you're out of state, knucklehead. And if you were in state, then we'd do a lot more of these together.
Yeah.
And the thing, too, that I want to remind people of, Jay trained Greg as the cops. So someday what I want to do is I want to get those two dorks in here at the same time, and we'd probably get some good stories.
Yeah. Jay was my FTO. I spent 6 or 7 weeks with him.
Yeah.
And we're still good friends to this day.
That's what he tells you.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that's true.
Well, it's what you say too.
Guys, with that, I'm going to close this episode of I Barely Got Here. Hey, I want to thank you for listening. If you like the show, please subscribe and post a review, or do both, and ask your friends to give it a listen as well. And if you have any questions or comments, shoot me an email at ibarelygodhere@gmail.com. And you can also follow me on Instagram and Facebook. Sam42.
Engine 286.
We are 10-7.